Some big-time visitors for Nebraska via the transfer portal. Ohio State quarterback Kyle McCord, Ohio State wide receiver Julian Fleming, both making their way out to Lincoln. Check out the sights and sounds, see what Nebraska potentially has to offer. And there's going to be a lot made about, well, are they going to land them? Are they going to commit? Are they going to be able to get them to be a part of their roster? All fair questions. We'll talk about that, of course, once we get a little bit more information, once we get a better gauge for where things stand with both these guys. But what I want to talk about is the impact. What does this mean for Matt Rhule? What does this mean for Kyle McCord if he does end up at Nebraska? What does it mean for Julian Fleming if he ends up at Nebraska? We'll talk about all those things right now, but first things first, Husker faithful. Had a lot of y'all down to this party for a minute now. Had a lot of you, some of y'all were the very first ones to subscribe to this channel. When we were in the hundreds, y'all subscribed. Now we're over 100,000. If you haven't yet joined the party, now's the time. We appreciate y'all so much in advance for that. Also follow me on Twitter and Instagram at JDPikel. So I think most simplistically put, this is a good thing for Nebraska. This is a good thing. At the most macro level, you're having two talented players come to campus and check out what you have to offer. This is a lot about Matt Rhule and the way that he's able to communicate with guys in the portal. This is a lot about where Nebraska stands from an NIL perspective. The fact that you got both of these individuals on campus is a good sign. And it's a good sign because Matt Rhule is building his roster in correlation to how the Big Ten is evolving. Because think about it this way. Nebraska, they lost 5 games last year by 1 score. If Nebraska were to just tinker with the roster a little bit, they probably would be able to win the Big Ten West next year. Now, the only problem with that is the Big Ten West no longer exists, right? Because you're adding UCLA, USC, Oregon, and Washington. All 4 talented teams that are being added into the equation, which is going to make it much more difficult to achieve your ultimate goal, or one of your ultimate goals, of winning the conference. So Matt Rhule is saying, okay, the price of admission is going up. My roster and what we did last year was not acceptable by my standards or anybody's standards. We got to get better. Let's go to the portal. Let's be aggressive. Let's bring individuals like this onto campus to see if we can't get them to be a part of our operation here. So that's a good sign. It shows some self-awareness. It shows the understanding that the Big Ten is going to be more difficult to win. So Matt Rhule is acting and recruiting accordingly. So that's first. A lot of people now are going to say, well, are they a fit? What would Julian Fleming mean? What would Kyle McCord mean? I think the conversation for Julian Fleming is pretty straightforward. We'll talk about McCord here in just a matter of moments. For Julian Fleming was the #1 wide receiver in 2020. The dude can play some football. All right, you don't get recruited to Ohio State to play wide receiver if you can't ball a little bit. Also, it wasn't like Julian Fleming just never saw the field. Dude had a role. Okay, there was a lot of people in Ohio State circles that kind of raised their eyebrows at Julian Fleming leaving. Yeah, listen, Marvin Harrison Jr. is in that wide receiver room. Emeka Egbuka's in that wide receiver room. It might be a little bit difficult to get all the targets that you would maybe want to get. Okay, so just because Julian Fleming didn't put up video game numbers at Ohio State doesn't mean he can't still help your operation. Doesn't mean he can't still boost your offense. Because I think he would absolutely be a tremendous acquisition for anybody that gets him. Like, for me, it just feels like if you get someone of his caliber in the right system, in the right fit, in the right situation, he could blow up. Simple as that. Like, Julian Fleming has that kind of ability from where I'm standing. Now, Kyle McCord, the conversation becomes a little bit more interesting. Because Kyle McCord, there's going to be a lot of people that jump on the punchline of, well, he wasn't the guy to beat Michigan. He couldn't get them where they wanted to go. Their offense wasn't as good without C.J. Stroud or without Justin Fields. Yeah, no duh. Those guys are elite. Some of the best to come through Ohio State are Justin Fields and C.J. Stroud. A lot of jokes about Honda McCord and all that. Like, here, that's all just punchline culture. We're going to talk about what's actually going on right now with Kyle McCord. Kyle McCord, it should be noted, similar to what we said about Julian Fleming, you don't get to be a starter or be at Ohio State, rather, on the offensive side of the ball if you can't play a little bit. Kyle McCord was a 5-star when he came out of high school in that 2021 class. To put a little bit more of a fine point on this, we shouldn't just overlook the fact that Kyle McCord won the starting quarterback job at a place like Ohio State. That's not a spot where you just kind of wait your turn and eventually they hand you the keys because you're the next guy in line. He had to battle for that job. Him and Devin Brown went back and forth. It felt like, really all fall camp. Even a little bit into the regular season, there was some conversation around who was going to be the guy. Kyle McCord won the starting quarterback job. We can't overlook that. The bar is set so high in Columbus for whoever you toss the keys to. And so for Ryan Day to feel confident enough at one point in time to make him the guy says a lot about his ability, says a lot about his leadership qualities, says a lot about what he can be for you if he does end up at Nebraska. Okay, so just because he didn't average 40 points a game, just because he didn't steer the Ferrari necessarily the way that you would have liked him to beat Michigan and to put up, like I said, 40 points a game. I don't think that's totally just a end-all, be-all definition on who Kyle McCord is as your starting quarterback, okay? Because when it comes to what they could mean for Nebraska, I think they could, like I just said, be huge talent upgrades. Kyle McCord, if he's able to just take care of the football, how much better is Nebraska this upcoming season? Because there's going to be so much talk around, well, what he didn't do pushing the ball downfield at Ohio State. Well, he had Marvin Harrison Jr. We'll talk about all those things. I promise you. We'll get to that in just a second. But Nebraska last year, again, I'll say this one more time. 5 games, 1 score, losses. Heartbreak. They went 5-7. Okay? Also worth noting, Nebraska did not have a quarterback last year between Heinrich Haarberg, Jeff Sims, and Chubba Purdy that had more touchdowns than interceptions thrown. Heinrich Haarberg had a 7 touchdown to 7 interception ratio throwing the football, okay? Nebraska gave the ball away right around 2.5 times a game, one of the worst in the country. 5 games, 1 score, losses. Kyle McCord, on the other hand, everything you want to say about him pushing the ball downfield, dude is efficient, top 10 QBR in the country, 24 touchdowns, only 6 interceptions. 2 of those came against one of the best defenses in the country in Michigan. I'm just saying, I think maybe we should keep an eye on what maybe would be required to be successful at Nebraska. Because from where I'm sitting, I don't think Nebraska would bring him in and say, all right, Kyle McCord, we're going to throw the ball all around the yard. We're going to kind of run it back to what you tried to do at Ohio State and just totally go 5 wide, throw the ball downfield. You're going to throw it 40 times a game. It's not who Nebraska wants to be anyway. We had Matt Rhule on this very show during the spring. He told us, he's like, I want to be a team that will run the football, control the game, want to block, want to tackle. That was who Nebraska was this past season. But you can't play that style if you turn the ball over as much as they did, especially at the quarterback position. Kyle McCord, I think, again, could be what the doctor ordered in that department. He could be the efficient guy for you. So much made around him being a game manager at Ohio State. Nebraska, if they had a game manager last year, they're probably playing for the Big Ten title in Indy, coming out of the Big Ten West. Now, again, the Big Ten West doesn't exist anymore, but the point still stands. Kyle McCord being plugged into that operation at Nebraska, it wouldn't be a thing where he has to go out and win every single game for you. So that's where we stand on Kyle McCord, and that's kind of how we feel about it going into this whole situation when it comes to impact. Now, here's where I stand when it comes to him potentially committing to Nebraska. We'll see if that happens or not. I think the conversation you approach it with is, Kyle, we'd love to have you here, but we can't promise anything. We say, come in here, we believe in your abilities to compete for the job, but you understand now. We got to have some competition. We got to have a little bit of best man win kind of thing with Chubba Purdy, because he did have some flashes last year. As much as there were some things that concern you, there were some flashes last year from old Chubba. And I think also the boom factor with a guy like Chubba Purdy is pretty high with what he could bring to the table running the football. Okay, so I think the conversation you would have is transparent and say, we believe in your abilities to compete for the job. Come in here, and if you win the job, great, we'll roll with it. And if I'm a fan on the outside looking in, I say, okay, well, at that point in time, I am trusting the people, being the coaching staff and Matt Rhule, the people with the most information and the most stake in the game. Again, their livelihood depends on who's playing quarterback for Nebraska more likely than not. I trust them to make the right decision. So if it's Kyle McCord, regardless of how I feel about it, regardless of what I saw last year at Ohio State, I'm trusting what happened behind closed doors, trusting their evaluation process, trusting the battle that, hey, the best man ended up winning. Great. It's Kyle McCord or Chubba Purdy. Now, if not, at the very least, what do we do? Elevate our room by nature of talent, by nature of competition. Kyle McCord, say what you want, dude was 11-1 as a starter last year. All the talk and all the jokes, all the this, all the that, 11-1 as a starter. Okay, so I think that point should probably mean something as well when it comes to Kyle McCord. He's a guy that, at the very least, will push whoever else is in that quarterback room to get better, to elevate their game, see where this thing goes. So I would be remiss if I didn't at least voice my my little bit of concern when it comes to Kyle McCord at Nebraska. Because like I just said, there's a lot to like. Could be the great fit schematically. He's more efficient, turns the ball over much less than what you've had in-house, and that might be all you need, to be honest. You might just need a game manager who's going to be efficient and a guy that's, gonna go out there and take care of the football and move the offense. That might be all you need. I would caution this thought, though. To think that Kyle McCord is going to step in there and be the guy that wins games for you just by nature of his stat line One, I don't think that's how Nebraska wants to live, so that's kind of the most encouraging part. The second part is I don't know if that's who Kyle McCord necessarily is. Because from where I'm standing, you have an individual in Kyle McCord who right now the definition of him is, or the book on him is rather, good moments, really efficient, probably not the guy that's going to take over a game to this point in his career. That's what we've seen. A very small sample size being one season. And now we're taking an offense around him that doesn't have first-rounders at wide receiver. Just call a spade, doesn't have the same talent level of Ohio State. They're working to get there, but they don't have that right now. We're turning down the talent around him. We better expect the same thing from Kyle McCord going forward with the new variables around him. Like, we don't take away Marvin Harrison Jr. from Kyle McCord and expect him to elevate and get better. Right? So I would just caution this thought that we bring in Kyle McCord, he's going to win the Heisman Trophy. And I'm not saying people are assuming that. I want to get out in front of that thought that we need to make sure we have the proper expectations when it comes to what Kyle McCord could be at Nebraska. All right? So in that regard, if you have the right expectations, great, let's roll with it. But taking away the top talent around him doesn't usually mean that you get better as a quarterback. Okay? So that's kind of what I want to make sure we're all on the same page there. One more thing I would say. I think in modern college football, it's becoming increasingly more important to have some kind of dual threat skill set. As good as Kyle McCord is throwing the football efficiently and being able to have a good completion percentage, right around 65% last year, he's not someone that's going to hurt you with his legs. Chubba Purdy is. Now, how much does that matter remains to be seen. But I do think we're getting further and further into an age of college football where you got to be able to have someone that can pull it on the quarterback, or pull it on read option, pull it on, or be able to run the football on quarterback design runs and things of that nature. Have to be a threat in my mind, especially in this offense from last year, to be able to kind of equalize some things for Nebraska as they get that talent level higher and higher. So all that's to say, massive to even get these guys on campus, in my opinion. I think it's a tremendous sign of where things are headed under Nebraska, under Matt Rhule. And I'm excited to see what happens going forward now. So we'll obviously have more thoughts if Kyle McCord and Julian Fleming do commit, either or. And we'll just kind of talk about these guys, period, going forward, talk about Nebraska going forward. So, again, make sure you're subscribed. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at JD Piquel. Tweet at me. DM me. Let me know your thoughts about this whole situation and how you'd feel if Kyle McCord were to commit to Nebraska. Appreciate y'all. We love y'all. We're going to keep this party rolling. We will see y'all next time. Hey, y'all. Thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel here to make sure you don't miss an episode of The Hard Count. Also, be sure to check out other videos on the On3 YouTube channel.